And so the Z Pod was born out of that conversation in the car. It didn't look anything like this in the moment, but really it was just a car ride, and the fact that my wife's also an aerospace engineer, and we ended up talking, or we still talk about kind of weird things that engineers talk about, and a couple of days later the company was formed. So that's kind of the backstory, and it's been a great ride since then over the last 4 years.
Hey everyone, and thanks for listening. Today I'm speaking with Rob Sladen, co-founder, chairman, and CEO of Zulu Pods, the world's first modular lubrication system for mission-critical applications in aerospace and defense. Rob, thanks for chatting with me today.
Hey, thanks for having us on. We really appreciate it, David.
No, really looking forward to this one. So share a little bit about your journey. You were, in the defense, industrial base, Pratt & Whitney, and then co-founded Zulu Pods with your wife. Tell me about what brought you to that place. What inspired that leap?
I had the pleasure of working at Pratt & Whitney, an awesome place to work and start your career and grow your career right out of college. And I spent 13, 14 years there. I spent most of my time working on mechanical systems, so lubrication systems, bearing compartments, gearboxes, anything that was oil wetted for essentially my whole time there. And towards the end of my career, I was leading pretty, fairly large engineering teams working on what's called the 6th gen fighter engine. Pratt was competing with GE. It would one day replace the F-35 engine, for example. That's considered the 5th gen fighter engine. A lot of experience with the Air Force at that point, or with the Air Force as a customer. And as a part of that experience, I also started getting more insights into future gen platforms, or I'll say even like what modern warfare was going to look like into the future, and things like autonomy and affordable mass and sort of quantities, nations building weaponry around quantities or large masses of weaponry to deter our adversaries or meet our adversaries if we need to. And then through that experience, I ended up changing pace a little bit at Pratt & Whitney and working for Pratt & Whitney GatorWorks. Again, this the idea was that it was going to be very analogous to Skunk Works. So I had a good amount of experience just in mechanical systems and sort of what the future was going to look like. Yeah, my wife is also an aerospace engineer, and actually the story or how it was started really was very much like her inspiration. We had a moment. We were riding in the car. We were driving to Orlando. At the time, my kids were in the back seat. They were both asleep. We finally had some time to actually talk, and we ended up talking about little jet engines that would power things like drones or missiles, and they're called expendable motors. So think of one-time use type motors that may only last for 15 minutes or 30 minutes. And out of that car ride, the Tide Pod for the jet engine was born. So the concept being that what if, for those little jet engines that typically use fuel to lubricate, what if we could give back the fuel to actually burn and increase range? Or for those jet engines that would use a traditional oil system, a pump and a tank like the one you have in your car, what if we could unitize the functions of that into a little pod and have just the perfect amount of oil for a given mission, under the lens that, a jet engine that only has a 15 or 30-minute use case doesn't really need an oil tank. You never refill it, right? So why do you need, the functions of an oil tank? And so the Z Pod was born out of that conversation in the car. It didn't look anything like this in the moment, but really it was just a car ride, and the fact that my wife's also an aerospace engineer, and we ended up talking, or we still talk about kind of weird things that engineers talk about, and a couple of days later, the company was formed. So that's kind of the backstory, and it's been a great, ride since then over the last 4 years.
That's great. What a story. Seeing a need and filling it.
Yeah.
How was the initial journey? You've been around for a little while, a couple of years. Entrepreneurship's hard. What have you seen, like challenges and things that you did not expect as you ventured into this new opportunity?
One of the things that for any new entrepreneur, even for us, is you really got to find the right early team. Like you really have to find that team that just collectively doesn't take no for an answer. very much believes that you're solving a real problem. There's a real pain point because, you're just going to get a lot of naysayers along the way. And so, finding that team is really critical and important. And luckily for us, we were able to find that team, very early and often. We've been, very successful raising angel money in the beginning stages of the company. We weren't super successful down the VC route, and we actually just sort of stopped doing that. And we just said, well, let's continue to do what works and raise through friends and family. We've raised to date over $5 million through friends and family. I would call them, angel investors with not a lot of large checks. So I think we probably in the beginning, I'm a first time entrepreneur. So in the beginning, I thought it would maybe be a little easier to raise capital through institutional investors. Institutional investors don't love hard tech. A lot of them don't love, working with the government or the DoD because of the bureaucracy or the slowness. And some of that is, I think, even perceived slowness, because there's definitely programs that the government is putting forward that are helping small businesses quite a bit. So I think raising money was maybe a little harder than we thought, but at the same time, I had never done this before. So I guess we sort of just said, well, yeah, that's not working, but let's just continue to do what is working. And shout out to our investors. We have over 130 investors in this company, tons of believers. I think, the belief early on was one thing that was people just have always gravitated to Zulu Pods, the stickiness, and we've had so much support and believers, and which makes some of those days that are maybe not the easiest of days as an entrepreneur, a whole lot better or easier. Another thing that, sort of along this journey, and I'm not necessarily saying it was, maybe I wouldn't say it was hard, but I think one thing we learned was you just got to be patient when you're working with the government. When I say that, I'll kind of share a bit of an anecdote here, but we're fortunate that we had some early adopters in the Air Force around the concept of our technology. And we found in working with them that they weren't going to be able to get an SBIR topic, which is something that, a lot of small businesses can leverage to get some traction in the government, in the aerospace world. We found that they weren't going to be able to go put out a topic, but we were connected with some folks in the Navy and NavAir, and they were also very interested in our technology, and they were interested in really the space we're in, this idea of mechanical system design or lubrication system design for expendable and attritable motors. And, they told us, hey, it's going to take some time, but we're going to work this topic. And we continued to just nurture that relationship and, give them updates. And about a year later, or a year and a half later, after the first sort of conversations, I'll never forget this day. We were looking at the new topics that were put out under the SBIR website or through the SBIR lens, and there was a topic out there for novel lubrication systems for expendable and attritable motors. So, you really gotta believe in what you're doing. You gotta stay patient and work hard, and so that learning patience, even though I'm not a very patient person at times, was something that we had to learn in the early days.
Absolutely. And you hear that, working with the government's hard, but yeah, the SBIR program seems to be a unique way to pivot through that. Well, let's get just specifically about, the pods, technology wise, what do you kind of heard what you're trying to do? What are some of the key attributes to the technology that you've developed?
Yeah. So if we kind of go back to your question of that aha moment or how it started. So, what are we trying to solve? Well, if we kind of go take at a 50,000 foot view, right? You have this modern warfare where, there's going to be a focus on affordable mass, things like swarm drones, taking the man or the woman out of the seat, right? Autonomy. And so, as a country or the DoD, what they're trying to balance this idea of cost and performance, right? So, if you are going to buy a lot more weaponry, cost becomes more important, right? In the sense of your buying power diminishes quite a bit if you're spending a lot on systems, right? And you're really focusing or prioritizing performance, because typically cost and performance fight each other. They're directly proportional in the sense of, if I want more performance on something, I'm usually going to have to go spend more money to get that performance. So that's kind of like the general problem that the nation is going to battle when we think about affordable mass weaponry or technology, right? So what are we doing? We're able to figure out how to solve that problem in the sense of keeping costs low or where it should be and not increasing cost while also increasing performance. That's what our pod technology does, at the macro level from a system level standpoint. So a lot of small jet engines that power drones or missiles, they either use fuel to lubricate and then you can't burn that. So that's not really ideal. You don't want to do that. Or they have a traditional oil system that has many parts. And again, it's not really ideal. So we go and say, okay, if it's a fuel lubricated system, we'll use oil instead. We'll use this one simple little pod that has the functions of a tank and a pump. We can retrofit it outside the engine. We'll give you that fuel back, and now you can burn it and you can increase range, all while keeping costs low. This part is not that expensive. It's the same idea on the traditional oil system where we get rid of parts. Again, we keep costs low, we keep weight lower. So at the end of the day, at the highest level, we're able to increase performance of a jet engine and keep cost relatively low. And another thing that we're doing sort of behind the scenes of the pod is getting really good at mechanical system, lubrication system design for an expendable engine, right? So if you think of a jet engine, there's maybe 7 or 8 major systems in the engine. We want to get really good at one of them. And once the oil leaves the pod, we want to get really good at how that oil gets to the things that need oil. And so what can happen is if you dump too much oil into something, for example, the fluid can actually create heat. And if you're creating heat, then you're losing efficiency somewhere in the engine. So compressor efficiency could go down, for example. And we don't want that, right? So we want to be able to figure out how to not do things like increase heat generation because it impacts overall system performance. So we're able to also increase performance by getting really good at just how we introduce oil to things that need oil once the oil actually leaves the pod. So you think about Zulu Pods, at least on the expendable motor side, we're trying to get really, really good at mechanical system, lube system design, get really good at one system out of the overall number of systems in the engine. All to help increase performance, bring the best technology to the warfighter. That's core to our mission at Zulu Pods.
Yeah, that's great. And so with that capability, is there a commercial application that you guys have also found, or is this pretty much just focused on the defense industrial base?
So there is commercial application that, and I'll say sort of along the journey of starting this company, what I've been talking a lot about here is I call it our primary oil system for, expendable and attritable motors. But what has happened along this journey here is the Army looks at our technology and has looked at this idea of a little pod, and they've said, oh, that'd be a really good backup or emergency reserve system technology. So think of like a single engine fighter. You lose your main oil system in a single engine fighter, not good, when you're at 40,000 feet
Not
in
good.
the air. Or helicopter engines today actually only have a standard of 6 minutes after a loss of oil event for the engine. And that's just not enough time. So our technology also has applications in backup systems. So again, think about like short duration. We're really focused on short duration system design where if we could give a pilot, a man or a woman, an hour, 2 hours after a loss of oil event, while not adding a lot of weight to the system, there's tremendous, benefits there, even in the commercial world, right? Where, our technology really becomes dual use when you think about being able to cross-pollinate into the commercial world. But even there on the backup systems today, we're focused on the defense side. We're working with the Army. We're working on safety standard increases for propulsion systems and helicopters. Yeah, definitely applications in the commercial space outside of aerospace as well. When you think about this, like emergency reserve, think of like sprinkler systems in a building that go off when they know they need to go off. Our smart pod technology that has applications there in the backup system side of the world.
Heck, I almost think I'd like it for like a lawnmower or weed eater. You could just, instead of dealing with all the oil, just go, boom, stick a little pot in there and be done for 3 weeks, and then you stick
Yeah, I mean,
or whatever.
the beautiful thing about this idea of our pods and the backup side is I'm showing this here, but the shape could be amorphous, right? It's very like retrofittable. It could be fit to a certain application. We're getting really good at precision delivery of small amounts of oil or large amounts of oil if we need to. But yeah, we think of like the maritime world, we think of like wind turbines, there's certainly applications that I think it's going to take us a long time to even think through all those and exhaust the market or the use cases on the emergency reserve side of things.
Yeah, well, small business definitely have to stay focused.
Yes.
Otherwise, you
Yeah.
get scattered everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge. As I listen to you, I mean, obviously it's awesome, but to get one of these implemented, this design, it seems like a very long road. I mean, to get throw it on a new engine or in an airplane, if you're not in the initial design phase, like seems very challenging. How are you looking at like trying to progress this forward so that you have the opportunity to validate its, your prototype, if you will, while still aligning to get into these larger systems?
When we think about our technology on the primary use case, so the pods for little jet engines, there are some tremendous tailwinds that are helping us right now, I'll say, move more quickly than maybe even I could have imagined, especially coming out of this space and seeing how long things take. One of those tailwinds is just the macro climate or this push for just to be able to build our country's weapon capabilities, affordable mass. This push towards smaller autonomous systems, and what that's doing is just accelerating the validation cycles or the timelines that a lot of these small engine manufacturers are working under. So you've got the DoD and the vehicle primes like the Northrops or the Lockheeds putting a lot of pressure on the propulsion system companies to qualify or validate their technologies quickly. So that's going on. Then when you think about these little jet engines, they're not as complicated as big jet engines. So the amount of time it takes to validate them, to do ground testing, flight testing, it doesn't take as long. So those things are helping quite a bit in terms of customers being excited about our technology, wanting to work with us, and also wanting to move quickly. Now, the other thing about our pod technology is it's retrofittable. Like this, for example, can go live on the outside of an engine. I can replace the things that are already there. I don't have to redesign inside the engine. We leverage a lot of the existing stuff that's already inside the engine. So you're not like, imagine if you've intercepted an engine that has already been designed and you don't have to start over, right? So that would be very difficult for us to go and attack our market. Our market could get very tiny if we had to start from the very beginning, right? So the fact that it's retrofittable helps quite a bit. And then we've been able to build our own internal testing capabilities to show that the technology works, such that when we do go put it on an engine and we do a test on an engine test, we actually have our own capabilities to do jet engine testing now in-house with our pods on there and show the customer. But B, when we give the pod to a customer and we say, okay, go test this on your jet engine, we already know what's going to happen. It's going to work. The customer knows it's going to work because we've been proving it to them for, with all the data. That helps us quite a bit to get customers to be convinced that, that the technology is better than the status quo. So that kind of captures, I guess, the essence of the primary oil system, or what is allowing us to move at a pretty fast pace with the small jet engines. In the backup system world, or the backup system technology, the Army wants to change the standard after a loss of oil event on helicopters. So they want to change the standard from 6 minutes to 20 minutes, and they are, their plan or their goal is to change that standard, introduce it into new builds, be able to retrofit the fleet that already exists out there. Think of like Black Hawks, for example. Now that's going to take time. It's a slower process than what I just described about little jet engines, but it's the fact that the Army wants to make a standard change is encouraging, right? And some of the engine prime manufacturers were already working with them under a federal contract with the Army. And so that will definitely take a bit more time, but there's funding out there, right? We've got funding from the Army. And if the Army wants to go do something, the beauty about working with the government is that they will fund the R&D, right? So they will work with you, they will fund you to develop the concept, and then one day, buy that from you. So it can be slow, but we have a lot of our team that comes from the defense primes. We understand how this world works. We understand what it's like working with the Army and the Air Force. And there's funding available. You just got to be clever. You got to be very diligent about, securing that funding and continuing to make sure you're funded after that last milestone type of thing.
So from dealing with the government, do you have, small company challenges? Are you using like consultants to help you navigate the government contracting system, or are you doing this all on your own through business development and relationships?
Yeah, so we pretty much have done this all on our own. I mean, we have a team that includes like a general counsel, for example. So we have legal advice, expertise, but we've largely just navigated this or figured this out on our own in terms of like getting SBIR awards in place, getting an Army contract in place. A lot of hard work, definitely some luck, along the way here. But we haven't really outsourced or paid consultants. And what we find, or what we have found, is even when we've maybe brought in some consultants, not paying them, but just people that have given us some advice or some thoughts, is you just got to be doing it every day. Like if you're not doing this, if you're not in the day to day and you're not like in the weeds, it's just hard to build those relationships like with the end customer. It's hard to keep things moving. And so what we found is, asking a lot of questions. We just learned a lot along the way, but it's largely been our full-time team that has, or our own team that has been able to execute and go build some business.
So, very cool opportunity out there. Can you tell me about, your competition? Have you been able to secure patents in order to protect that IP?
Yeah, so we have couple patents issued, some patents pending, more in the hopper. We're really focused on building that moat around the castle. Our competition that we typically see is the sort of the traditional status quo systems that exist. So this idea of a traditional oil system or fuel lubricated system, where they want to multi-purpose the fuel. We haven't found, I'll say, direct competition with this idea of unitizing some parts into a something like a pod that has one part that does multiple functions. We haven't seen too much competition around optimized bearing compartment design or mechanical system design for short duration jet engines. We do know that there's lots of smart engineers that work at some of these defense primes, but thankfully what we've seen is that those defense primes and those engineers that work there, they want to partner with us, work with us, versus going and spinning up their own teams or investing their capital in what we're doing. And a lot of that is because we're in a space where we tend to fall in this concept of a supplier design component. And, even the defense primes have to figure out what they're going to do in-house, what they're going to outsource. And we tend to fall sort of under that waterline. And it's a nice spot to be, where we're not turbine technology, we're not combustor technology. It just puts us in a good spot where they're very apt to want to work with us instead of, at least to date, against us.
Well, it's great. It's tough for the prime. I mean, that's why most of the great innovation comes from the small, medium-sized businesses. And so you guys are a shining example of that. How do you balance, innovation, securing, your IP? You're working with sensitive potential engines and designs. How do you handle security from a, cybersecurity from a, small business perspective?
Yeah, we do a lot of things. One thing that we need to do is be compliant to some of these like government standards, something like the NIST, for example, right? So the nice thing about that is there are standards that we have to do our best to comply to that are pretty bulleted, in the sense of like, you need to do this, you need to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? And you can kind of go down these like checklists of like, what things do you have in place versus what do you not have in place as a company. So we are like NIST compliant, for example, right? And we've hired outside consultants to help us make sure we are compliant. In order to get some of these government contracts, you have to have certain things in place. One of them is good cyber security type, maintenance things. A lot of us come from the defense prime world as well. So there's another element of security or safety around data and things we're doing that are maybe fall under the ITAR category or, the air category, or for example, not technical data, and they're just Zulu Pods. It's maybe Zulu Pods proprietary, but it's not. It doesn't fall under a certain classification code. So, just sort of having that background helps us where we understand how to mark things, being careful about sharing stuff with U.S. citizens versus non-U.S. citizens, and kind of looking out for that. Just being mindful of some of these things is important.
Yeah, it's the compliance. You're trying to build your widget, but you got all these compliance factors, and it's challenging but important.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's transition a little bit. So, I went into business, co-founded this company with my best friend from high school and his brother. Everyone's like, "Don't work with family, don't work with friends." You've jumped into that with your spouse. How has that been going, just for folks that ever consider that?
So it's interesting because Danielle and I used to work together at Pratt & Whitney. So not exactly like doing the same thing or on the same project, but in the same group. So I would see her, all the time. I mean, going to work, leaving work together was a pretty normal part of our life. It's pretty normal in that sense because we've worked together before. I actually think that I wouldn't be able to do this without working with my wife. Because we're both in it together. We have two small kids, and I can't imagine co-founding a company and being in a startup when your significant other, or my significant other, my wife, wasn't a part of it, because I think it would be very difficult for her to understand like my day or what I'm going through or why this is important and why I may need to do this instead of doing something right now for Noah or Penelope. So being in it together has helped us be successful. It's made this successful. I think it'd be very difficult to be raising a couple small kids and not be doing this with her.
Yeah, well, the trust is definitely there.
For sure. And we wouldn't be here without Danielle. So
she did have the idea. That's great. So for young, aspiring entrepreneurs or folks that were in your spot, working for primes or working for companies, you go, I've got an idea, let's go. What advice would you give to them jumping into, aerospace and defense and starting a company?
The thing that you could do, before you, let's say, fully take the plunge, is to just get some feedback on that. Like, start to do, understand how big the market is, the market pain point. I mean, are you really solving a problem? Would customers want to buy it, work with you? If it's something you lived on the day-to-day, that may be pretty easy because you're doing it on the day-to-day. But if it's a little bit outside of your day-to-day, you definitely want to understand what you're maybe getting yourself into. Once you've decided you want to take that, you want to do it, you got to rip the Band-Aid off. You got to put all your time and energy into it and rip the Band-Aid off. Because if you don't, I think you'll live with regret potentially, type of a thing, where you'd be like, I should have just at least tried it, because now it's, some people may say, well, it's too late. So, once you've like, okay, this is real, like, yeah, there can be a real business that can be built around there. You gotta rip the Band-Aid off. And then you've got to go build a team. Like, you can't do this stuff on your own. You need to build a team around you with skills that you don't have. And in some cases, the same skills you may have, but you need people, you need energy, you need bodies. So go build that team as fast as you can. Try to think about if you can build a prototype or something. Our first prototypes were these little pods that truly looked like detergent type pods that broke down under heat, and they were oil filled in plastic, and we melted the plastic and we put it inside of a rotating shaft, and we told everybody they'd be thermally activated. We built a simple rig. That's how we raised our first round of capital. We raised like $425,000 on these little plastic pods, knowing they were going to change. But that prototype helped people see like the vision, because sharing a vision on a PowerPoint is just not as effective or powerful as showing a demonstration. So I would, after you've built that team, you've got to, how do you go start thinking about building that prototype as fast as possible? Get familiar with the concepts of safes and how to raise money without too much maybe legal bills. So rip the Band-Aid off, build that team, build a prototype, and
get smart on fundraising.
Start raise capital like you have no money in the bank, even if you have 3 or 4 months of runway. Just raise capital like as fast as you can, as hard as you can. I know I just gave a bunch of pieces of advice, and they sound simple there, but it does take a lot of hard work. Like, it's important to know that, like, you're gonna have some hard days. Like, it's gonna have some really tough days. But if you've done those, if you built that right team around you, like, you really can do anything. Like, I truly believe that the team is so important. It's all about the team.
Yeah, great advice. So for Zulu Pods, next 3 to 5 years, where are you going to be? What do you think this is going to look like? New opportunities?
Yeah, we're going to grow. So our team is going to grow in terms of adding more engineers, increasing R&D. We, on the primary oil system side of things, next 3 to 5 years, I do expect that we'd be in production on production motors, and then be involved in many development programs. If we look at our customer base today, who we're working with, where they're at in some of their development, those timelines make a lot of sense that you'd see pods flying around in the sky in the next 3 to 5 years. On the backup or oil system side of things, I believe we'll be much further along with some of the engine primes that we're working with in terms of not just having our pods be digitally integrated into their engines, but actually be doing some physical testing, some validation testing with our backup systems. We expect that we'll have a new product line. So keeping this idea of package, small footprint, fluid delivery systems in mind, we really look at Zulu Pods as an innovative fluid delivery system company.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're doing with this idea of putting oil in pods, we believe that we'll have product segments that consist of things like fuel pods, anti-corrosion pods, so pods aimed at maintenance, repair, and overhaul depots or cycles. Think about this idea of an engine coming off wing. It's going to be stored for long periods of time. Can we hook up a pod to that, and a pod that would have, be on a schedule and burst some type of anti-corrosion fluid into a system every X amount of days, take the man or woman out of the loop, help with anti-corrosion prevention in maintenance, repair, and overhaul facilities or cycles. So new products, to think about where we're going, all around this idea of innovative fluid delivery systems. And we think that there's opportunities for commercial applications with our pods, in emergency backup systems, with partnering with like unique fluid companies. So, those backup systems could be in, I talked about wind turbines. They could be in factories, for example, that, you don't want a factory line to shut down because, something failed, right? Like, how do you bring precision fluid delivery backup systems to, things like factories? So an expansion of our current products, or how we think about our backup systems, maybe with different fluids than oil in the commercial world. We think that, the next 3 to 5 years, we'll be able to move into that true dual use type technology use case, right? Where today we're very focused on the defense side of things, but we believe that we'll see more commercial applications over the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, that's super exciting, and what a cool concept.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Well, all right. Unfortunately, that's all the time we're going to have to cover today. But before we wrap it up, if folks want to learn more about you or Zulu Pods, how best would they follow?
So you can check out our website, zulupods.com. There is a place in there where you can drop us a note. It'll go to our info@zulupods.com. So we'll see that. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, but the easiest thing is probably drop us a note at our website. And yeah, thanks again, David, for having us. We appreciate it. We appreciate what you're doing here as well, in terms of just sharing all the innovative companies out there that are trying to help the warfighter and help the good old USA.
Here. Go USA. Well, thanks again, Rob. Best of luck to you and Zulu Pods, and let's stay in touch.
All right. Hey, thanks so much.